Chapter 1. My neighbour's key felt cold and wrong in my hand. Carl had died 3 days ago, and his son, a man I'd never met, had called me from another state. "You were his only friend," he'd said. "Could you check the shed? See if there's any gardening stuff worth saving before I list the house." He needed it done by tonight. So here I was, standing in the damp gloom of Carl's shed, the man who'd quietly mowed my lawn for a decade after my bill passed. The place smelled of oil and old wood. I aimed my flashlight beam. Rakes, a bag of fertilizer, a wheelbarrow. My task was simple. Sort the tools from the junk. I opened a rusty metal cabinet. Behind a stack of yellowed newspapers, my light caught a small wooden box, not a tool. Curiosity, that old nag, made me lift the lid. Inside, on a bed of faded velvet, lay a tarnished silver locket, a child's locket shaped like a heart. My breath hitched. My fingers, gone clumsy, fumbled with the tiny clasp. It sprung open. There, behind a smudged piece of glass, was a tiny, curled lock of pale blonde hair. The world tilted. The shed walls pressed in. I knew that hair. I had washed it, brushed it, tucked it behind a small ear. It was my Sarah's hair. The locket was the one she wore the day she vanished from the park 22 years ago. The day my 7-year-old girl was taken. The day a part of me died. Carl. Gentle, quiet Carl, who brought me tomatoes from his garden. My legs gave way. I sat hard on the dirt floor, the cold metal biting into my palm. All these years, he lived 50 feet from my back door. He drank my iced tea. He listened to me talk about my missing daughter. And he knew. A calm, terrible clarity settled over me. The sorting was over. A new task had begun. I closed the locket, my heart a frozen stone. I slipped it into the pocket of my house dress. I would not call the distant sun. I would not call the police. Not yet. First, I had to know everything. I had to be sure. I stood up, dusted off my slacks, and walked out of the shed, locking it behind me with his key. I smiled at my cat on the porch. Inside, my hands did not shake as I put the kettle on. The game had changed. I was no longer a grieving old woman. I was a hunter in a flower print dress. Chapter 2. The teacup was just hot enough to feel through the china, a small, solid anchor. From my kitchen window, I could see Carl's dark, silent house. My mind was a filing cabinet, yanking open drawers. The weeks after Sarah vanished, Carl had been present. He'd helped put up flyers. He'd brought casseroles. He'd said, "I'll keep an eye out, Margaret. I drive all over for my job." He was a long-haul trucker back then. My focus had narrowed to a single, sharp point. Find proof that linked him irrevocably to that day. The locket was mine, a mother's certainty, but it wasn't enough for the cold record. They'd say I was a confused old woman, that grief had finally broken me. My own son, David, would say that. "Mum, you're not sleeping again. Let me book you an appointment." This search would cost me the last shred of peace I had clung to. The comforting story of a random monster was gone, replaced by the intimate horror of a friendly face. I was racing against the clock. The sun would sell. The new owners would clean out that shed. Evidence would be tossed in a dumpster. I needed to get back inside Carl's house. The shed was one thing, the house was another. I couldn't just walk in. But I remembered Carl kept a spare key. Not under the mat. He was smarter than that. He'd shown me once, years ago, when he went to visit his sister. "If you see a leak, Maggie, the key's in the frog." A concrete garden frog by his front steps. I waited until the street was empty. I walked over, my slippers silent on the grass. I lifted the heavy frog. There it was, A brass key, green with age. The back door unlocked with a soft click. The smell of stale air and lemon polish hit me. The living room was neat, sterile. A recliner, a TV, no family photos. It was the house of a ghost. I started with the bookshelf. Nothing. The desk drawer held bills, a checkbook. Then I saw it, tucked behind the desk leg. A small, flat cardboard box, like one for stationery. I pulled it out. It was sealed with brittle yellow tape. Written on the side in faded marker was a date. My blood turned to ice. It was the month and year Sarah disappeared. I didn't open it. Not here. This changed everything. This box was not for the shed. He'd kept it in his living room, hidden in plain sight. I took the box. I locked the door. I replaced the key. As I walked back to my house, I saw David's car pulling into my driveway. He was early for his weekly check-in. He got out, waving a paper bag from the pharmacy. "Mum, brought your refills." He smiled. In my hands, hidden behind my back, I clutched the box that might hold my daughter's killer's secrets. I had to get it inside before he saw. Chapter 3. I managed to slide the flat box under my sofa just as David stepped into the living room. "You're looking flushed," he said, putting the pharmacy bag on the coffee table. "Have you been gardening? You shouldn't overdo it." His concern felt like a blanket, smothering and warm. I wanted to scream. "Your sister's murderer lived next door." But I made my face soft, grateful. "Just a little tidying," I said. I needed him to leave so I could open the box. To do that, I had to endure his routine inspection, checking my fridge, my pills, asking if I was eating. He meant well, but his watchful eye was a constant weight. He saw me as fragile. "I spoke to the realtor about Carl's place," David said, taking a soda from my fridge. "They'll list it next week. Maybe a nice young family will move in." He said it like it was good news, a fresh start for the neighborhood. I felt the box under the sofa like a live wire. "That's quick," I said, my voice steady. "No reason to wait. The son wants it gone." David sat down, right above where the box was hidden. "Listen, Mom. Susan and I were talking." Susan, my daughter-in-law. "We think you should consider that assisted living complex over on Maple. Just for a look. It has activities, people your age." There it was. The gentle push. The first nudge toward being managed, put away. My quiet revenge had to happen before they decided I was too old to live in my own home. Before they could sell my house out from under me to pay for a nice room somewhere. "I'll think about it," I lied smoothly. "But not today. I'm tired, David. Thank you for the pills." He finally took the hint, kissed my cheek, and left. I locked the door behind him. I waited until his car turned the corner. Then I got on my knees, my joints protesting, and pulled the box from under the sofa. I carried it to the kitchen table. I got a steak knife from the drawer and carefully sliced the old tape. Inside were not papers. It was a collection of objects: a child's pink hair ribbon, faded, a small plastic barrette shaped like a butterfly, a tiny white sock, and a Polaroid photograph. The colors were bleached, but the image was clear. It was a roadside diner, the sunny slope, its sign lit against a dark sky. A man was standing by a truck, his back to the camera. But on the ground near the truck's front tire, barely in focus, was a small, light-colored sneaker. A sneaker I had bought at Sears. A cold, precise hatred filled me. This was his trophy box. And the photo was a location. A place he had been with her. It was the first real clue in 22 years. I knew where I had to go tomorrow. Chapter 4. The Sunny Slope Diner was a 2-hour drive east on an old state highway that had been bypassed by the interstate. I told David I was going to a church book sale with a friend. I used the cash I kept in a coffee can for emergencies. The drive was a blur of strip malls giving way to pine trees. I found it just past a truck-way station, looking sad and worn. The sign was still there, though half its letters were dark. I parked my sensible sedan between two big rigs, feeling conspicuous. My plan was straightforward. Show the photo, ask questions. This journey into a past I feared was a risk, and someone here might have been involved, might call someone. I walked in, the bell jingling. The air smelled of grease and coffee. A waitress with tired eyes looked up from wiping a counter. A few truckers sat in booths. I chose a stool at the counter, my heart hammering against my ribs. "What can I get you, hun?" the waitress asked. "Just coffee, please." My voice sounded thin. When she brought it, I placed the Polaroid on the counter, careful to cover the sneaker with my finger. I was wondering, do you recognize this place? This diner? She squinted. "Sure, that's us. Back when old Manny ran it. Sign looked better." She chuckled. "Do you remember a man, a trucker maybe, who came through here a lot? Maybe 20-some years ago?" I described Carl as he was then. Thinning brown hair, a mole on his neck, always polite. Her expression changed. The friendly weariness dropped away, replaced by something closed and careful. "I've worked here 30 years. I see a lot of faces. Can't remember them all." She turned and busied herself with the coffee machine. It was a dismissal. Her sudden silence was heavy with warning. She knew something. I felt a wave of despair. This was a dead end. Then an old man in a booth near the window cleared his throat. He had been listening. He wore a worn denim jacket and a cap. He caught my eye and gave a slight nod toward the door. I left a 5 under my cup, took my photo, and walked out. I stood by my car, pretending to look for my keys. A minute later, the old man came out. He didn't look at me but lit a cigarette, leaning against the diner's wall. "Lady," he said, his voice a gravelly whisper. "The guy you described. He was regular for a while. Drove a rig for a produce company. Then he stopped coming. Around the time a little girl went missing from over near Millerton. It was in the papers. Cops came around asking questions. We all got told not to gossip. It was bad for business." He took a long drag. The waitress, Brenda, in there, she was sweet on him for a minute. He gave her the creeps after a while. Too quiet. He'd sit and just stare. "Did he ever have a child with him?" I asked, my throat tight. The man shook his head. "Never saw one. But I saw him once, out back by the dumpsters. He was burning something in a metal can. Little kids' clothes, maybe. I thought it was odd." He dropped his cigarette, crushed it. "That's all I know. You didn't hear it from me." He walked away, around the corner of the building. I got in my car, my hands trembling now. It was confirmation. From a stranger. The photo, the burnt clothes, the timing. It was a thread. But it wasn't enough to reopen a case. I needed something official, something that couldn't be ignored. I thought of Carl's house, soon to be emptied. There had to be more. One place I hadn't looked. His bedroom. I started the car. I had to get back before the realtor's lockbox went on the door. I had one more chance to search. Chapter 5. It was dusk when I pulled back into my driveway. Carl's house was a dark silhouette. No realtor sign yet. No strange cars. The street was quiet. The frog key was still in place. This was my last window. I let myself in through the back again, moving quickly now. I went straight to the bedroom I'd avoided before. It felt like a greater violation. A single bed, neatly made, a plain dresser, a small closet. I started with the dresser, gloves on my hands this time, socks, underwear, folded shirts, nothing. The closet held work clothes, a winter coat. I felt along the top shelf. My fingers brushed against something that wasn't fabric. A leather-bound book, like a diary, shoved to the back. I pulled it down. It was a ledger, the kind used for logging mileage and expenses. Carl's trucking log. I sat on the edge of his bed, the chenille bedspread scratchy under me. I flipped it open. The entries were in neat, cramped handwriting. Dates, times, routes, fuel costs. I turned to the pages from the month Sarah disappeared, and there it was, his route for that week. He was supposed to be hauling lettuce from Salinas to Denver, but his log showed a 2-day gap. Layover was written with no location. Then, on the second day, a single entry. Detour, personal time. No mileage logged, no explanation. Beneath that entry, almost as an afterthought, were 4 numbers scribbled in the margin. 385. I stared at them. Not a mileage. Maybe a road number. A locker combination. A pressure built behind my eyes. This was it. The proof of his lie, his detour, on the day my world ended. But the numbers meant nothing. I heard a car door slam outside. I froze. Peering through the blinds, I saw a sedan with a magnetic realtor sign on the door park in front of Carl's house. A woman in a blazer got out, talking on her phone. She was early. She walked toward the front door. I had seconds. I shoved the ledger under my sweater. I crept out of the bedroom, down the hall, and slipped out the back door just as I heard the front door unlock and the realtor's cheerful voice call, "Hello? Anyone here?" I didn't look back. I crossed the lawn, stepped into my own house and locked the door. I leaned against it, breathing hard, the ledger pressed to my chest. I had his secret schedule. I had the locket. I had a witness's memory. But it was all circumstantial, the sad collection of an old woman. The police would nod politely and file it away. The numbers, 385, taunted me. What were they? I needed to make them talk. I needed someone who could force them to talk. It was time to stop being a detective and start being a plaintiff. I went to the hall closet and pulled out my old address book. I flipped to the L section. There was a name from a long time ago, Lawrence Powell. He wasn't just a lawyer. He was the prosecutor who had worked on Sarah's case before it went cold. He was retired now, but he would remember, and he would know what to do with a trucker's log and a set of mysterious numbers. I picked up the phone. Lawrence Powell's voice on the phone was older, drier, but the same crisp tone I remembered from the courthouse hallway decades ago. "Margaret Hollis," he said after a pause. "I remember your case. I remember your daughter. I never forgot." I told him I had new information, things that couldn't be discussed over the phone. He agreed to meet me the next morning at a quiet park downtown. "Bring everything," he said. The call lasted 3 minutes. Now I needed to turn my collection of horrors into a weapon the law could not ignore. But involving him meant exposure. If this went nowhere, I would be the old woman who harassed a retired prosecutor with her delusions. Worse, David might find out. He'd see it as proof I needed supervision. The tension was a ticking clock in my own home. David called that evening. "Everything okay, Mom? You sounded distracted earlier." I told him I was just tired from my book sale trip. "Good," he said. "Because Susan and I got a brochure from Maple Grove. I'll bring it by tomorrow." Tomorrow. The same day I was meeting Powell, I had to manage both, to appear perfectly normal while holding a volcano inside. The next morning, I dressed carefully. A nice skirt, a sweater. I put the locket, the Polaroid, and Carl's ledger into a plain tote bag. The park was mostly empty, just a few nannies with strollers. Powell was on a bench by the duck pond, an old man with a cane and sharp eyes. I sat beside him, not looking at him, and began speaking quietly. I laid out the objects one by one on the bench between us. The locket, the photo, the logbook open to the critical page. He didn't touch them. He listened. He looked. His face, weathered and professional, showed nothing. Then his finger tapped the ledger. These numbers, 3085. You have no idea? None, I said. It's not a road number around here. He mused. Could be a storage unit, a locker. He finally picked up the Polaroid, studied it. The sunny slope. I remember the uniforms asking about it. They hit a wall. He looked at me. This is compelling, Margaret. It's also entirely circumstantial. A good defense attorney would shred it. The locket could have been planted. The log is suggestive, not definitive. We need something that physically places him with Sarah, or places her in his custody. My heart sank. The house is being sold. Everything will be gone. Then we need to move before it is, he said. The son. He's the legal authority now. We need to get into that house officially, with a pretext. A search for family documents or heirlooms you agreed to help find. It was a thin plan, requiring the son's permission. Powell gave me a card. Have him call me. I'll present it as a legal courtesy before probate. I took the card. It felt like a lifeline and a trap. I thanked him and left. When I got home, David's car was in my driveway. He was on my porch, holding the glossy Maple Grove brochure. He saw my tote bag. "Where have you been all dressed up, Mom?" he asked, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. "I had a doctor's appointment," I said, the lie smooth as butter. "Just a checkup." I unlocked the door, and he followed me in, placing the brochure on my kitchen table like a warrant. "Everything all right?" he pressed. "You should have told me. I would have driven you." "It was just a routine visit, David. I'm perfectly capable." I busied myself putting the kettle on, my tote bag tucked safely by my feet. The brochure showed smiling seniors doing pottery. It felt like a catalogue for a nicely decorated prison. "Of course you are," he said, in that placating tone. "But Maple Grove has a shuttle for appointments, and nurses on site. It's safer." Safer? The word hung in the air. Now I had to do two things: appease David to buy time, and contact Carl's son to get back into that house under Powell's legal guise. The price would be my own autonomy, playing the frail mother to keep my son off the scent. The wait was his watchful presence. He stayed for an hour, talking about his kids, my grandkids, how busy they all were. How much easier it would be if I were somewhere with support. Each word was a tiny nail in my independence. I nodded. I smiled. I said I'd look at the brochure. Finally, he left. I immediately dug out the number for Carl's son, Greg. I called. A wary voice answered. I introduced myself as his father's neighbor. "I'm so sorry for your loss," I began, my voice gentle, grandmotherly. "I'm helping sort some of his personal effects, and I found some old papers that might be important. Insurance policies, maybe a will draft. My friend is a retired probate lawyer. He said we should secure them for you. Could he and I come by for one last look, to make sure nothing important is tossed by mistake?" Greg was silent for a moment. "The realtor said the cleaners are coming Thursday," he said. "If you can do it before then, I guess it's fine. I can't be there. I'll tell the realtor to let you in Wednesday." He sounded tired, uninterested. I gave him Powell's number. "Have your lawyer call mine just to square it away," I said. He agreed. It was set. Wednesday, 2 days away. I called Powell and told him. Good, he said. I'll handle the son. You be ready. I felt a surge of grim energy. This was it. The next day, Tuesday, I went to the grocery store. When I returned, something was off. My back door, which I always locked, was unlocked. The deadbolt was turned. I stepped inside. My breath caught in my throat. Nothing seemed disturbed. The TV was off. The sofa cushions were straight. But on the kitchen table, the Maple Grove brochure was open to a different page. The page showed a studio apartment floor plan. I always left it closed. Someone had been in my house. David had a key, but he wouldn't sneak in, would he? A cold finger traced my spine. Maybe my search hadn't gone unnoticed after all. I called David, my voice carefully measured. David, did you stop by the house today? No, Mum, he said, distracted. I could hear office sounds behind him. I've been in meetings all day. Why? I thought I forgot to lock the back door. It's nothing. We chatted about the weather and hung up. He wasn't lying. I checked every room. Nothing was missing. My hiding place for the evidence, inside a box of winter scarves in the hall closet, was untouched. The violation was the point. A message. I can get in. Was it the realtor checking on the neighbouring property? Greg, the son, changing his mind? Or someone else? Paranoia, that old enemy, began to whisper. What I needed to find tomorrow was critical now. Something in Carl's house so damning it would blow this all open before whoever was watching me could stop it. The consequence was my shattered sense of safety in my own home. Wednesday morning arrived, grey and drizzling. Powell picked me up in his sensible sedan. He was all business. I spoke with the son. He's given blanket permission for us to search for legal and financial documents. The realtor will meet us with the key. We have 2 hours before the staging company arrives. The realtor, the same woman in the blazer, was waiting. She was all false cheer. Of course, anything for the family, she said, unlocking the door. She handed Powell the key. I'll be back at 11. She left us alone in the hollow, echoing house. You take the bedroom and office, Powell said. I'll take the basement and living room. Look for anything hidden. Floorboards, vents, behind pictures. We split up. I went back to the bedroom, my heart a drum. I moved faster this time, no longer reverent. I pulled up the carpet edge. Nothing. I tapped the walls. I emptied the closet entirely, feeling each board of the floor. My knees ached. Then, in the back of the closet, under where the ledger had been, I noticed a floorboard was slightly less dusty than its neighbours. The nails were newer. I took the claw hammer from my tote bag. I'd come prepared. I wedged it in and pried. The board came up with a squeal. In the cavity below lay a sealed plastic freezer bag. Inside was a small pink child's wallet. My hands shook. I opened it. A library card. Sarah Hollis. And a folded, brittle piece of paper. A child's drawing of a house, a son, a stick figure family. In the corner, in my handwriting, was her name and the date. A drawing from her school folder. I made a sound, a choked gasp. Powell heard and was at the door. He saw what I held. His professional calm cracked for a second. My God, he whispered. This was it. The physical proof. She had been here. Her possessions were hidden in his floor. Then we heard the front door open. Hello? Mr. Powell? It was the realtor's voice. She was early. Powell swiftly took the bag from me. Follow my lead, he murmured. He stepped into the hallway, holding the bag openly. We found some personal effects, he told the realtor, his voice authoritative. Family mementos. We'll be sure the sun gets them. The realtor nodded, distracted, looking at her watch. But her eyes flicked to me, standing in the bedroom doorway. She saw my face, pale and stricken. She offered a tight smile. "You look like you've seen a ghost," she said. "Just the dust," I managed to say, forcing a cough. Powell smoothly steered us toward the exit, the plastic bag in his hand looking innocuous, like old receipts. "We're all finished here," he told the realtor. "Thank you for your cooperation." Outside, the drizzle had turned to rain. In Powell's car, he placed the bag on the console between us. We sat in silence for a moment, the only sound the rain on the roof. "This is what we needed," he said finally. "This changes everything. I'll take this to a contact in the state's attorney's office. This, with the ledger and the locket, should be enough to reopen the investigation, to get a warrant for the rest of the property." My relief was a physical wave, followed immediately by a deep, hollow grief. Holding her wallet, her drawing, it was like touching a ghost. This victory came with feeling her loss, fresh and raw, all over again. Powell drove me home. "Say nothing to anyone," he advised. "Not yet. I'll call you when I've spoken to my contact." I agreed. He pulled away, the evidence with him. My house felt different. The silence was heavier. I checked every lock. The encounter with the realtor nagged at me. Her comment, her look. Was it just professional impatience? Or something more? I tried to rest, but couldn't. I made tea. The phone rang. It was David. "Mum, I need to ask you something," he said, his voice strained. "The realtor for Carl's house just called me. She said you and a man were over there today, and you seemed very upset. She was concerned. She asked if you were emotionally stable. She mentioned you were looking for things that weren't there." My blood ran cold. The realtor hadn't just been early, she'd been suspicious. And she'd called my son. The walls were closing in from a new direction. "David, that's ridiculous. We were helping the son find important papers. That's all." "Who was the man, Mom?" The question was direct, sharp. "A retired lawyer, a friend. He's helping with the legalities." The lie felt flimsy. "You don't have friends I don't know about," David said, and I heard the worry turning into suspicion. "I'm coming over after work. We need to talk about Maple Grove. I think it's becoming urgent." He hung up. I was running out of time. Powell had the evidence, but the system moved slowly. David was moving quickly. If he decided I was unstable, he could start guardianship proceedings. Everything could be taken from me. My home, my freedom, my chance to see this through. I had to stall him. I had to appear utterly, boringly normal. I put the kettle on again, my mind racing. Then I saw it. On the small table by my front window, where I keep my mail, a new brochure for a different senior community, Whispering Pines. I hadn't put it there. I never got mail from them. Someone had been inside again, and this time they'd left a calling card. The second brochure was a clear threat. It meant the first unlocked door wasn't an accident. Someone was trying to scare me, to herd me toward a decision, to move out, to be quiet. Was it the realtor, acting on Greg's behalf to ensure a quick, quiet sale? Or was it connected to something darker? Now I couldn't just wait for Powell. I had to actively defend myself. I had to find out who was entering my house, and I had to secure my position before David arrived. It meant confronting the fact that I might not be safe here. The clock was counting down to David's arrival and the mysterious intruder's next move. I needed evidence of the intrusion, for myself and for Powell. I didn't have a security system, but I had a simple digital camera, the kind my grandkids laughed at. I set it up on a bookshelf in the living room, pointed at the front door and the table with the brochures. I camouflaged it behind a small potted ivy. I set it to record on a loop, overwriting every 12 hours. It was a start. Then I prepared for David. I hid all notes about Carl, about Powell. I took the Maple Grove brochure and put it prominently on the table, with a notepad beside it. On the pad, I wrote in my careful script, questions for David. 1. Cost comparison to staying here with home health aid. 2. Can I bring my own furniture? 3. Pet policy for cat. I was building a performance of a grandmother reasonably considering her options. David came at 6. He looked tired. He saw the notepad first. His shoulders relaxed a fraction. "You're looking into it?" he asked, his voice softer. "I'm being practical," I said. "But David, I need to be honest. Going through Carl's things, it stirred up old memories of Sarah. That's why I seemed upset to that realtor. It was a bad moment." I let my voice waver just a little. It wasn't entirely a lie. His face softened with sympathy. "Oh, Mom, I'm sorry. That's exactly why all this is too much for you. This house, that empty house next door, it's full of ghosts." He believed the performance. He saw what I wanted him to see, a sad, old woman haunted by the past. We talked about whispering pines. He said he didn't send that brochure. I feigned confusion. "It must have come in a packet of mailers," I said. He accepted that. The crisis was averted for now. He stayed for dinner, and we talked about my grandson's soccer game. It was almost normal. After he left, I checked the camera. I fast-forwarded through the footage. Empty living room, light changing. Then, at 2:17 p.m., the front door opened. Not David. A woman. She wore a jacket, her hair up. She walked in calmly, without hesitation. She placed the Whispering Pines brochure on the table. She looked around, her face set and businesslike. It was the realtor. She let herself out, locking the door behind her. She had a key. She must have taken an impression from David's key when he'd hired her years ago to evaluate my house's value. Just for estate planning. She was trying to pressure me out, a quicker sale for Carl's house next door, maybe a commission on selling mine. It was about money, not about Carl's secrets. The relief was immense, but so was the anger. She was trespassing, manipulating, using my grief and age against me. I had her on tape. But as I watched her confident walk, a new, chilling thought occurred. What if her interest wasn't just financial? What if Greg, Carl's son, had asked her to keep an eye on me? What if he knew more about his father than he let on? I copied the camera footage onto a separate memory stick. The image of the realtor, Janine, walking through my front door as if she owned the place was a violation that burned cold in my chest. This was no longer just about Sarah. It was about my right to my own walls. But using this tape risked everything. If I confronted her, she'd tell David I was setting traps, proving his point about my instability. If I went to the police, it would be a minor trespassing complaint, and the focus would shift to me, away from Carl. I had to be smarter. Powell called mid-morning. His voice was tense with controlled excitement. "My contact is interested. Very interested. The wallet and drawing are a game changer. They're pulling the old case files. But Margaret, they want to know about the chain of custody, how we found it. They'll want to talk to you." That meant formal interviews. That meant David would find out. I was being squeezed from two directions. The legal machinery was grinding to life, while the personal threats to my freedom were closing in. I had to manage both fronts. "When?" I asked. "A few days. They're assembling a task force, cold case unit." He paused. There's something else. They ran a quick check on Carl's son, Greg. He has a minor record. Fraud, years ago. Served 6 months. He's been clean since, but it's a pattern of deception. The pieces shifted. Greg's wariness, his quick agreement to our search. Was it indifference? Or was he afraid we'd find something he already knew was there? I needed to understand Greg. I logged onto the dusty desktop computer in my spare room, the one I used for emailing grandchildren. I searched his name and the old fraud case. It was a local news snippet. He'd been involved in a scam selling fake vacation vouchers. The article quoted a victim saying Greg was very persuasive, seemed so trustworthy. Like father, like son. My doorbell rang. I jumped, closing the browser. Through the peephole I saw a delivery man with a bouquet. I signed for them. Lilies. The card read, "Thinking of you during this time of transition. The team at Whispering Pines." No signature. The boldness was breathtaking. It was harassment, designed to wear me down. I didn't throw them out. I placed them on the table next to the brochure. I took a picture with the camera still running. Evidence. Then I picked up the phone. I didn't call Powell. I called the realty office listed on Janine's card. When the receptionist answered, I used my sweetest, oldest voice. "Hello, dear. I'm Margaret Hollis over on Elm. Janine has been so helpful with the estate next door. I was wondering if she could pop by this afternoon. I have a question about property lines for my own planning." I was baiting a trap. Janine arrived at 4, her smile polished and sharp. I invited her in, gesturing to the kitchen table where the lilies and brochures sat. "Thank you for coming," I said. "Can I get you some tea?" "No time, I'm afraid," she said, her eyes scanning the room, lingering on the hallway. "What can I help you with, Mrs. Hollis?" "It's about these," I said, pointing to the flowers. "And the brochures. You see, my son didn't send them. And I know you were here yesterday, around 2:17 p.m. I kept my voice mild, conversational. Her smile froze, then melted into a look of practiced confusion. "I'm sorry? I was at a closing yesterday afternoon." I picked up the remote for my old TV, which I'd hooked to the camera. I pressed play. The footage, clear and silent, showed her walking in, placing the brochure, looking around. I paused it on her face. All the colour drained from her own. The professional facade cracked. You can't... That's an invasion of my privacy." "My home," I corrected softly. "My privacy. Why are you trying to scare me into moving?" She stared at me, calculation replacing panic. She sat down, uninvited. "Look, it's not personal. Greg Anderson wants a quick, quiet sale. The house next door is difficult enough. A death, an old tragedy in the neighborhood. Having the victim's mother right next door, especially one who's visibly upset, asking questions. It's bad for the comps. It makes the whole street seem sad. If you were to move to a lovely community, it solves the problem. Greg suggested you might need a nudge. He said you were fragile, living in the past." She shrugged, a cold, businesslike gesture. "I have a buyer interested in both properties. For a developer, it's a significant commission." So it was greed, layered over Greg's desire to bury his father's secrets. He was using her, but her admission was a gift. "Greg asked you to do this?" "He implied it would be helpful. He has power of attorney for the estate. He's my client." She leaned forward. "Mrs. Hollis, be reasonable. What do you want? A quieter place? A cash incentive to smooth this over? We can make this easy." She was offering a bribe to abandon my home and my quest for justice. Refusing meant facing their continued hostility, Greg's and hers, but going along with it would mean betraying myself. I smiled, my gentle grandmother smile. I need to think about it. Can you give me a day? Relief flashed in her eyes. She thought she'd won. Of course. Take your time. She left, her steps lighter. As soon as her car was gone, I called Powell. I told him everything. Greg's actively trying to push me out and silence the neighborhood. He's scared. He should be, Powell said. The cold case unit wants to speak with him. They're setting up an interview for tomorrow. They'll ask about the house, his father. They don't know about the harassment yet. Keep your evidence safe. I hung up. The official world was moving. But I needed to move faster. Greg was the key. He knew something. Before the police talked to him, I needed to understand what he was so afraid I'd find. The numbers 385 still meant nothing. I looked at the ledger copy. 385. Could it be a street address? A box number? Then it hit me. Not a road. A storage unit. Carl was a trucker. He'd have stuff in storage. I went to my phone book and looked up storage facilities within a 50-mile radius. There were dozens. I started calling, asking if they had a Unit 385 rented to a Carl or Greg Anderson. On the 7th call, a bored voice said, "Yeah, we have a 385, under Anderson, past due on payment, scheduled for auction clearance next Monday." The name of the facility was Store All, on the industrial side of the next county. The auction was in 4 days. Anything inside could be lost forever. I couldn't wait for the police. Their process was too slow. I had to see inside that unit, but I couldn't do it alone. I needed Powell, and I needed a legal pretext. I called him back. "I found 385. It's a storage unit. It's about to be cleared out." I gave him the details. He was silent for a long moment. "If we call the police now, they'll need a warrant. That takes time, maybe more time than we have. The son is the legal owner of the unit's contents now. If we could get his permission—" "He'll never give it," I said. "Not if he's hiding something." "There might be another way," Powell said slowly. "If the unit is in Carl's name, and the estate hasn't formally taken over the contract, the facility manager might let the next of kin in with ID and the gate code. Greg may not have even dealt with it yet. He's out of state. I can call, pose as a lawyer for the estate, say we need to do an inventory for probate before the auction. It's a gamble." "Do it," I said. The tension felt like a physical weight. If the manager called Greg to verify, it was over. We were gambling on bureaucratic indifference. Powell called me back an hour later. "It worked. The manager is lazy, just wants the back rent. He said if we pay the overdue balance, we can have access today for 1 hour. He thinks I'm Greg's lawyer. I'll pick you up in 30 minutes. Bring cash." I had the cash from my coffee can. It was my emergency fund, meant for a new roof, a medical deductible. Now it was for this. I counted out the hundreds, my hands steady. Powell arrived, and we drove in silence. The facility was a maze of orange garage doors under a grey sky. The manager, a sullen man in a stained jacket, took the cash and pointed to Unit 385. 1 hour. Don't make a mess." He gave us a gate code and walked away. The door was heavy, rusting at the bottom. Powell rolled it up. The sound echoed in the concrete canyon. A single light bulb hung from the ceiling. The unit was not full. A few boxes, an old bicycle, and a large, heavy-duty trunk, the kind sailors used, padlocked shut. My breath caught. Powell pulled a small set of bolt cutters from his coat. The snap of the lock was loud in the quiet. He lifted the lid. It wasn't filled with trophies. It was filled with files. Neat, organized hanging folders. They looked like business records. But the labels made my blood run cold. They were place names and dates spanning 2 decades. towns along interstate routes. And in each folder, there were newspaper clippings, reports of missing children, mostly girls, some boys. Some were solved, many were not. Sarah's clipping was there, in a folder labelled Milliton. He had been tracking them, studying them. This wasn't just about my daughter. Carl had been a hunter, and these were his records. The scale of his secret life yawned before me, dark and endless. At the very bottom of the trunk lay one more thing, a small, leather-bound address book. Powell opened it. The first page had a single name and number written in Carl's hand. It was Greg's name, and next to it, the notation, "Cleaned truck, no evidence." The address book shook in Powell's hands. He knew, he whispered. Greg knew. He helped. The notation was vague, but damning. Cleaned truck. The truck from that detour 22 years ago. Had Greg, then a young man, helped his father erase the evidence? Was that the secret he was being paid to keep with the quick sale and the pressure on me? The horror was no longer a solitary ghost. It was a family business. I felt sick. We had to get this to the police immediately. But we were in a storage unit, with evidence we'd obtained under false pretenses. The chain of custody was already complicated. "We need to call my contact right now," Powell said, pulling out his phone. "We can't remove anything. We have to secure the scene." He made the call, speaking in low, urgent tones. I stood amidst the boxes of misery, the cold seeping into my bones. While he talked, I looked at the address book again. Flipping past Greg's name, there were others. Initials, phone numbers without names. A network of silence, or something worse. Was Greg just the cleaner, or was he involved in the later years? The fraud conviction suggested a capacity for deceit. Powell hung up. "They're sending a forensics team and detectives. They'll be here within the hour. We need to wait outside, not contaminate anything further." He took pictures of the open trunk with his phone. We rolled the door down, but didn't relock it. We waited in his car. The manager peered out of his office once, then shut his blinds. The gravity of what we'd found settled between us. "This changes the investigation entirely," Powell said. "They'll pick Greg up for questioning the moment they land. This isn't a cold case anymore. It's potentially active, with an accomplice. An accomplice who knew I was poking around. Greg had tried to scare me off with the realtor. What would he do when the police arrived at his door? The situation changed once more. He was no longer a distant, disinterested son. He was a suspect who knew where I lived. The police arrived silently, 3 unmarked cars. Powell spoke with a detective, a serious woman in a trench coat. They went to the unit. We were told to go home, that we'd be contacted for formal statements. "Do not speak to anyone about this," the detective instructed me firmly, "including your family." Driving home, the world looked different. The streets, the houses, all felt like they held secrets. When Powell dropped me off, he said, "You should stay with your son tonight, Margaret, until Greg is in custody." But going to David's meant explaining, and I couldn't. "I'll be fine. I have locks." He looked doubtful, but left. I double-checked every lock. I pulled the curtains. The house was too quiet. The phone rang, startling me. I looked at the caller ID. It was not David. It was a number I didn't recognize, with an out-of-state area code, Greg's state. I let it go to voicemail. A minute later, my phone chimed with a notification. A voicemail. I played it, my hand trembling. A man's voice, tight with controlled anger. "Mrs. Hollis, this is Greg Anderson. I know you were at the storage unit with a lawyer. I know you called the police. You need to stop. You have no idea what you're digging up. For your own safety, stop now, or I'll have to tell your son everything you've been hiding from him about your instability. He'll have you committed so fast you won't know what hit you." The line went dead. The threat was clear. He would weaponize my own family against me. The voicemail was a declaration of war. Greg was cornered and lashing out. His threat to turn David against me was his strongest weapon. I saved the message. It was another piece of evidence: harassment, witness intimidation. I forwarded it to Powell immediately with a text. "Threat from Greg Anderson. Received just now." Powell called back instantly. "Do not respond. The police are en route to his location now to bring him in for questioning. He's panicking. He may try something else. Is your son on his way?" "No, I haven't spoken to him." But even as I said it, I saw headlights swing into my driveway. David's car. My heart plummeted. Had Greg already called him? I met David at the door. His face was etched with concern, but not anger. "Mum, I got a weird call from a blocked number. Some man, he said I should check on you, that you were agitated and making dangerous accusations." "What's going on?" So Greg had called, but anonymously, testing the waters. I had to control the narrative. I used the truth, selectively. "David, come in." I sat him down. "I have to tell you something. I've been helping the police with an old case, about Sarah. New evidence came to light about the neighbor, Carl. It's been very stressful. His son, Greg, is not happy about it. He's been trying to pressure me to drop it. He even had the realtor come in here to scare me." I showed him the camera footage of Janine. David watched, his face shifting from confusion to outrage. "She broke in. Mum, why didn't you tell me?" "Because you'd say I was too involved, that it was too much for me," I said, looking him in the eye. "And maybe it is. But I have to see it through. For Sarah. The police are handling it now. Greg just threatened me over the phone. I've given the recording to the lawyer helping me." David ran a hand through his hair. He looked from the TV screen to me. The protective son warred with the man who saw his mother as capable for the first time in years. "You should have told me," he repeated, but his tone was different. Softer. "This is serious. You shouldn't be alone. I'm staying here tonight. On the couch." It wasn't a suggestion. It was him finally choosing my side, not as a warden, but as a guard. The relief was profound. "Thank you," I said, my voice cracking with genuine emotion. We had a quiet dinner. He didn't mention Maple Grove. He asked careful questions about the case, and I gave careful answers. It was the most honest talk we'd had in a decade. Later, as he settled on the sofa with a blanket, my phone buzzed with a text from Powell. "Greg Anderson in custody. Police executing search warrants on his residence and electronic devices. Stay put. You did it." I didn't feel triumph. I felt a deep, weary exhaustion and a fragile hope. The machinery was in motion. But as I lay in bed, listening to my son's soft snores from the living room, I knew it wasn't over. Greg was in custody, but what would he say? What would he reveal about his father? And what would happen when the full story of Carl's trunk, with its files on other missing children, came to light? My quiet street would never be the same, and neither would I. The revenge was no longer mine alone. It belonged to the law now, and to all those other names in the folders. My job was almost done, but a new, heavier burden had just begun. The morning light felt different, thinner. David was in my kitchen making coffee, the normalcy of it almost strange. The local news was on the small TV, muted. Then a banner flashed. "Arrest in decades-old cold case." David turned up the volume. A reporter stood outside the police station. talking about the arrest of Gregory Anderson for obstruction of justice and possible connection to the historic abduction of Sarah Hollis. My daughter's name, said aloud on television. David looked at me, his face pale. "It's really happening," he whispered. I nodded, unable to speak. This victory meant the quiet, private grief I had lived with for 22 years was gone forever, replaced by a public spectacle. It was now public property. The phone began to ring. First a local number I didn't recognize, a reporter, no doubt. Then another. I unplugged the landline. My cell phone, buried in my purse, remained silent for now. Powell called David's phone. David handed it to me. "They've sealed Carl's house and the storage unit as crime scenes," Powell said. "Greg is lawyered up and not talking, but the evidence in the trunk. Margaret, there were files on 7 other missing children from 3 different states, along routes he drove. The FBI is being called in. This is much bigger than our local department." My legs felt weak. I sat down at the kitchen table. Other families, other mothers. The horror expanded, a dark stain seeping through time. My search for answers about Sarah had accidentally revealed a chamber of other lost souls. The weight was immense, a responsibility I never asked for. "What do they need from me?" I asked, my voice small. "A formal videotaped statement, today, if you can. They want your account of finding the locket, the ledger, everything. David can bring you." Powell's tone was gentle but firm. The process was swallowing me. David drove me to the police station. He held my arm as we walked through a side door, away from the few gathered reporters. The interview room was cold. A detective and a video camera. I told my story, from the key in Carl's shed to the trunk in Unit 385. I showed them the copy of the ledger. They were respectful, solemn. When I mentioned the other brochures, the realtor, they took notes. "We'll be speaking with Ms. Janine Fowler," the detective said. "Her actions may constitute harassment and trespassing." It took 2 hours. When we left, David was quiet. In the car, he said, "I had no idea, Mom. I thought you were just getting older. I'm sorry." His apology was a balm and a fresh wound. It meant he finally saw me, but only after I had become someone who uncovered monsters. We drove home. My quiet street was no longer quiet. A news van was parked at the corner. I pulled my scarf over my head. "Use the back door," David said. Once inside, the silence of the house felt fragile, like glass. The strain was no longer just from Greg or a greedy realtor. It was from the looming, vast story about to break. I was at the center of it, an old woman in a house dress. I didn't know if I had the strength for what came next. Then my cell phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Mrs. Hollis, my name is Anne. My daughter Jessica went missing in 2004 near I-80. The police just called me. They said your case might be connected. Can we talk?" The text from Anne was a direct line to a pain I understood intimately. To ignore it was impossible. To engage was to take on her grief as my own. David saw me staring at the phone. "Who is it?" he asked. I showed him. His face tightened. "Mum, you can't. You're not a detective. You're a witness. This will eat you alive." But he was wrong. I was already a part of it. The connection was made. If I turned away now, I was no better than the people who looked away from Carl for decades. What I needed to do was simple but immense. Bear witness. I replied to Anne with one sentence. "I am so sorry. I am here if you need to talk." Her call came 5 minutes later. Her voice was raw, trembling, with a hope so fragile it hurt to hear. They didn't tell me much, just that a man who drove truck routes was a person of interest, And that your daughter's case, they found things. Do you know anything about a green hair clip? A tortoiseshell barrette? My heart cracked. I remembered the butterfly barrette in Carl's box, but not a green one. I'm sorry, I don't, I said, feeling useless. But the police have everything. They have a trunk full of files. If there's anything about Jessica, they will find it. We talked for 20 minutes. She cried. I cried. David listened from the hallway, his face a mask of helpless concern. After the call, I was drained. Powell called. The FBI is taking over the multi-state angle. They'll be coordinating with the other families. They may want to speak with you, as the person who started it all. A clinical word for the grenade I'd pulled the pin on. What about Greg? I asked. Still not talking. But forensics is going over his father's house with new warrants. They're pulling up floorboards, checking the yard. The image of strangers digging up Carl's garden, where he grew his tomatoes, was grimly satisfying. The doorbell rang. David answered. It was a courier with a sealed manila envelope for me. I signed for it. Inside was a formal-looking letter from a law firm I didn't recognize. It was a notice of a civil lawsuit. Gregory Anderson was suing me for defamation, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and unlawful entry onto his property, the storage unit. He claimed my false and malicious accusations had caused him severe mental anguish and damaged his reputation. He was seeking a significant sum in damages. I laughed, a dry, brittle sound. It was a desperate move, a counterattack from a cornered man. But it was also a new, practical threat. A lawsuit meant lawyers, depositions, court dates. It meant stress and money. David read the letter, his anger flaring. This is ridiculous. We'll fight this. But I saw the flicker of doubt in his eyes. What if some of it stuck? What if a jury saw an obsessive old woman and a grieving son? The lawsuit was a weapon designed to exhaust me, to make me regret ever opening that shed door. Powell was livid when I read him the letter. It's a stunt. His lawyer is throwing mud. I'll handle it. Don't lose a minute of sleep over this. But I did. That night, lying awake, the lawsuit felt like a chain. Greg, even from custody, had found a way to reach out and try to shackle me. The fight was no longer just in the past. It was here, in my present, threatening my future. I got up and made tea. In the dark living room, I saw the silhouette of Carl's house through the window. A single light was on inside. Police, still working. I wondered what they were finding in the dirt. Powell had a colleague, a civil litigation attorney, respond to the lawsuit the very next day. The response was aggressive, outlining my status as a witness in an active criminal investigation and suggesting Greg's suit was frivolous and retaliatory. It would buy time, but the anxiety was a low, constant hum. The FBI arrived in the form of 2 agents, a man and a woman, both dressed in somber suits. They came to my house. David insisted on being present. They were polite but thorough, going over my story again, focusing on Carl's habits, his travel patterns, any strangers he might have mentioned. I had little to give them. Their interest was in the network, the possibility of others involved. They asked about Greg. Did he ever visit? Did he and his father seem close? I told them about the cleaned truck notation. The female agent nodded, her expression unreadable. We're pursuing that line. They left, taking the air of calm with them. The local detective called Powell with an update. They had found something in Carl's backyard, near the old compost pile. A small, corroded metal box, buried deep. Inside were more Polaroids, not of children, of trucks. Different trucks, various license plates, dates written on the backs. Some matched the dates in the files. They think he might have had associates, Powell told me, his voice grave. Other drivers. The photos might be records of who he worked with or who he shared interests with. The conspiracy was widening, moving beyond one sick man and his son. The domestic horror was now a sprawling, interstate suspicion. I felt adrift. I had acted for personal reasons, aimed at the ghost next door. I hadn't signed up for this. Then, a piece of quiet news. Janine Fowler, the realtor, had been charged with criminal trespass. Her realty company had fired her. A small, concrete victory. It felt hollow. David had to go back to his own family, his job. "Are you sure you'll be okay?" he asked for the 10th time. "I have Powell. I have the police number on speed dial. I'll be fine." I needed him to go, to regain some semblance of my own space, even if it was a space filled with ghosts and legal threats. After he left, the silence was a relief. I went to the hall closet and took down the box of winter scarves. I pulled out Sarah's locket. I held it in my palm, the metal warming to my touch. This was why I started. This small, cold heart. Not for headlines or FBI task forces. For her. My cell phone rang. It was Powell. "Margaret, sit down. They've made a deal with Greg. He's agreed to talk, to give a full confession about his role in covering up Sarah's abduction, in exchange for immunity on anything else they might find in those files. He's giving them names, Margaret. Other men." I sat down hard. Immunity? For covering up a murder? For being an accessory after the fact, 22 years ago when he was a teenager, the DA thinks the information on possible active predators is more valuable. They want the bigger fish. Powell sounded exhausted, conflicted. "He's going to give a formal statement tomorrow. They want you to have the option to hear it, or to have a family representative there. It will be graphic." What it would take to know the full truth was now laid before me. I could learn the details of my daughter's last moments from the mouth of the boy who helped hide them. Or I could remain in the dark, with the monster I knew. The burden was immense, a choice between two kinds of agony. "I need to think," I whispered. "I understand," Powell said. "I'll be there either way." I hung up. I looked at the locket. Sarah's face, forever 7, smiled from a framed photo on the mantel. Did I want to know what that man and his son did to her? Would it give me peace? Or would it poison whatever was left of my soul? The quiet in the house was no longer peaceful. It was the silence before a storm of awful truth. I didn't sleep. I paced. I held the locket until the chain left a mark on my palm. By dawn, I had made my decision. I would not go. I would not give Greg Anderson the power to plant his version of Sarah's end inside my head, to replace my memories with his horrors. But I would send David. He was her brother. He had a right to know, and he was stronger. His memories of her less daily, less visceral than mine. He could be the family's witness. I called him as the sun came up. I explained the deal, the confession. "They want someone there. I can't. But will you go? For me? For Sarah?" He was silent for a long time. "Yes," he finally said, his voice thick. "I'll go." Powell picked him up at 9. I stayed home. I cleaned. I scrubbed the kitchen sink until it shone. I rearranged books on a shelf. Physical tasks to keep my mind from picturing that room, that man, those words. The hours dragged. At one point I saw a black sedan pull up next door. More agents. The digging in the yard had resumed. I kept the curtains closed. My phone rang at 2:17 p.m. "David." "Mom." His voice was broken, raw. "It's over. I heard it." He was crying. It was quick. He said it was An accident. She hit her head. He panicked. He called Greg, and Greg helped him dispose of the body. In a quarry, 50 miles north. They weighted it. He sobbed. I'm so sorry, Mom. An accident. A panic. A disposal. The clinical words did nothing to soften the blow. My beautiful girl, reduced to a problem to be disposed of. But there was a location. A quarry. After 22 years, we might have a place to lay her to rest. That was something. A terrible, painful something. Are you okay? I asked my son, my own tears falling silently. No, but I will be. Powell is bringing me home. He hung up. I sank into my chair. The mystery was solved. The how was now known. It didn't bring relief. It brought a final, desolate certainty. It was finished. Carl was dead. Greg's life was ruined. The truth was out. But it tasted like ashes. Powell brought David home. David looked 10 years older. He hugged me, a long, silent hug. Powell waited. The quarry is in a remote area, Powell said gently. The FBI is coordinating with the county there. They'll need dental records. From you, Margaret. It could take weeks to search. I nodded. I had kept a tiny envelope with a baby tooth in her memory box. They could have it all. After Powell left, David and I sat together in the quiet living room. He held my hand. We didn't speak. There was nothing left to say. The fight was over. The enemy was gone. All that remained was the long, slow process of burial, both for Sarah and for the people we used to be. I looked at my son, his head bowed in grief, and I realized what I had done had protected him too. He no longer saw a frail old woman. He saw his mother, who had fought a monster and won. But the victory party was a funeral, and we were the only guests. A week passed. The news cycle moved on to a new tragedy. The FBI's investigation into the network was ongoing, but it was a quiet, bureaucratic process now. Anne, the mother of Jessica, called me once more to thank me. The green beret had not been in Carl's collection, but the mere possibility of a lead, of someone finally looking, had given her a measure of peace. That, at least, was a good thing to come from this. Greg's civil lawsuit was dismissed. His criminal plea deal was finalized. 5 years probation, a permanent criminal record, and mandatory registration. He would not see prison, but his life was shattered. I felt no pity. The realtor, Janine, accepted a plea for community service. Her career was over. David came over every other day, but the visits were different. Less about checking on me, more about sharing quiet company. He brought my grandkids more often. The noise of them in the house was a healing balm. Then, a call from the sheriff of the remote county where the quarry was located. They believed they had recovered remains. The dental records were a match. It was Sarah. They would release her to us for burial. The finality of it was a door clicking shut. David and I made the arrangements. A small, private graveside service. Just family. We chose a plot in the local cemetery, under a young oak tree. The day of the burial was bright and clear. My grandchildren placed single flowers on the small casket. David said a few words. I stood silently, the locket around my neck under my blouse. After everyone left, I stayed for a moment by the fresh earth. I found you, sweetheart, I whispered. I brought you home. There were no more mysteries, no more monsters hiding next door, just this patch of ground and the rest of my life. That evening, back in my quiet house, I took a walk into my backyard. Carl's house was dark, a sold sign now staked in the front lawn. The sale had fallen through once it became a crime scene, but someone had bought it at a steep discount. A young couple, I'd heard. They would plant new things in the garden. I looked at my own hands, wrinkled, spotted with age. They had turned a key, opened a box, and brought down a world of evil. They were not weak hands. I went inside and called Powell. "Thank you," I said, "for everything." "You did the hard part, Margaret," he replied. "You never gave up." We said goodbye. I made a cup of tea and sat in my favorite chair. The silence was no longer an enemy. It was just silence. The story was over. It was finished. But my life, what was left of it, was my own again. I picked up a photo album, one filled with pictures of Sarah and David as children, of Bill, of happier times. I turned the pages slowly, smiling at the memories, allowing the good to finally outweigh the bad. The war was done. Now came the peace. The quiet lasted almost a month. The young couple moved into Carl's house. I saw them from my kitchen window, carrying in boxes and a crib. A baby was coming. They had no idea what the soil in that garden held. I thought about telling them, but I didn't. Let them have their fresh start. Some secrets are better left buried. My own peace was fragile, a thin veneer over a well of sadness. I went through the motions: grocery shopping, church on Sundays, video calls with my grandkids. David checked in, but his voice had lost that edge of worry. He saw I was functioning. He didn't see the hollow nights. Then, a plain envelope arrived in the mail. No return address. Inside was a photocopy of a newspaper article from a small town 2 states over. The headline read, "Local man questioned in connection with interstate kidnapping ring." The man's name, Roy Peterson, was circled in red ink. A sticky note was attached, in a handwriting I didn't recognize. "He was in Carl's photos. Thought you should know. A friend." The article was recent, from just last week. Roy Peterson, a retired trucking dispatcher. The ring was the one Carl had been part of. Someone was sending me updates. Another mother? A detective? The anonymity felt threatening, a reminder that the story wasn't truly over. The network was being dismantled, and someone wanted me to know. This new information shattered the hard-won calm. It dragged me back into the world of investigations and monsters. I had a choice: ignore it, throw it away, or acknowledge it. If I engaged, I was inviting the strain back into my life. But if I ignored it, I was turning my back on the other families, on the justice that was still unfolding. I showed it to David when he came over. He frowned. "Mum, this isn't your responsibility anymore. The FBI is on it. This could be from anyone. A reporter. A crank." "It's from someone who knows about the photos," I said. "That wasn't public." "You don't know that. Details leak." He took the article. "Let me give it to Powell. He can pass it to the right people. You need to step back. For your health." He was right, of course. But stepping back felt like abandoning a post. I had become a symbol, however unwillingly, and symbols have duties. I nodded agreement to David, but a resolve was hardening inside me. I wouldn't pursue it, but I wouldn't look away either. I would be a witness, from a distance. A few days later, Powell called. "David gave me the article. The FBI is aware of Roy Peterson. He's a person of interest. They're building a case. You're not to contact him, understand? This is their show now." I understood. I was being sidelined for my own good. It was the sensible, safe choice. That night, I dreamt of the storage unit, of endless filing cabinets stretching into darkness, each drawer labelled with a mother's name. I woke up, tired. The next morning, there was another envelope. This one contained a single photograph, a colour copy. It showed a group of men at a truck stop picnic table decades ago. Carl was there, younger, So was Roy Peterson, and a third man, his face familiar. I squinted. I had seen him before, on my street. Years ago, he had visited Carl once or twice. I remembered a loud laugh, a baseball cap. He was a neighbor, but from several blocks over. He had moved away years ago. What was his name? Jerry? Gary? Gary something. The note on this one said, "Ask about Gary Miller." My hands went cold. The circle was here, in my own neighborhood. The threat was no longer abstract. It was a name from my past, a man who might still be out there. I couldn't give this to David or Powell. Not yet. First, I had to be sure. I had to know if my memory was playing tricks on an old woman. I went to the hall closet and pulled out my own photo albums, the ones from community picnics, from before Sarah was gone. The photo albums smelled of old paper and memories. I spread them on the dining table, my reading glasses perched on my nose. I looked for pictures from the neighborhood block party the summer before Sarah vanished. There was one, a wide shot of families on blankets. And there he was, in the background, talking to Carl. Gary Miller. A big man with a thick mustache, holding a beer. He'd worked at the auto parts store. His wife was nice. They moved away a year or two after Sarah disappeared. I'd never thought anything of it. Now, the image in the anonymous envelope took on a sinister clarity. Gary Miller had known Carl. He was in a photo with him and Roy Peterson. He might have been part of it. The thought made my skin crawl. This wasn't a distant monster anymore. This was a man who had lived 6 houses down, who had waved at my children. Knowing this robbed my own memories of their sanctity. Every past interaction was now suspect. I needed to find out what happened to Gary Miller, discreetly, without alerting David or triggering official channels that might warn him. The risk was being wrong, of accusing an innocent man based on a grainy photo and the word of a stranger. I couldn't use the computer. David checked the history. I needed old-fashioned legwork. I drove to the public library. I used their computer, a different one than last time. I searched for Gary Miller, common name. I added our old town name, his likely age. It took an hour. I found an obituary from 8 years ago. Gary Miller, survived by his wife and 2 adult children, died of a heart attack. He had moved to a town in Florida after leaving here. Relief and frustration warred in me. He was dead. He couldn't hurt anyone else. But he had lived a full life, died surrounded by family while my daughter was in a quarry. Justice would never touch him. The anonymous sender had given me a name I couldn't do anything with. Was that the point? To torment me with unanswerable questions. I printed the obituary. As I was leaving the library, I felt a prickling on the back of my neck. I turned. The librarian was helping a patron. A man in the history section had his back to me. No one was looking. I shook off the feeling. At home, I placed the obituary with the other anonymous materials in a new folder. I labeled it closed. I felt a weary sense of duty. I had looked. I had verified. There was nothing more to do. Perhaps that was all that was ever asked of me. 2 days later, a knock on my door. It was a woman in her 50s, dressed in a simple coat. She looked nervous. "Mrs. Hollis? My name is Linda Miller. Gary was my father." The world seemed to tilt. I invited her in, my heart hammering. She sat on my sofa, clutching her purse. "I've been getting letters," she said, "anonymous, about my dad, saying he was involved with your neighbor, with terrible things. They mentioned your name. I live in the next county. I had to come. I need to know if it's true." Her eyes were pleading, full of a daughter's fear. The anonymous sender hadn't been guiding me. They had been guiding her to me. I was now the keeper of the terrible truth, asked to shatter another woman's peace. Linda Miller sat across from me, waiting for an answer that could destroy her father's memory. I saw my own reflection in her anxious eyes, a daughter who loved her parent. The anonymous sender had set a cruel trap for both of us. I had a choice: tell her my suspicions, show her the photo, and pass on my nightmare. Or protect her, lie, and let her keep the father she knew. But if there was a chance her father had been involved, didn't she have a right to know? Didn't the other families? "Can I get you some tea?" I asked, stalling. She nodded. In the kitchen, I boiled water, my mind racing. The ethical weight was enormous. Finally, I brought the tea and sat down. "I received anonymous mail too," I said carefully. "A photo. It showed your father with my neighbor, Carl Anderson, and another man. The police believe Carl was responsible for my daughter's death and for the disappearances of other children." Her face went pale. "That's it? A photo?" "My dad knew lots of people. He was in the Rotary Club. He coached Little League." Her voice was defensive, trembling. "The other man in the photo is named Roy Peterson. He is currently being questioned by the FBI in connection with a kidnapping ring." I kept my tone factual, soft. "I don't know what your father knew or did. I only know they knew each other. The police might know more." She began to cry, silent tears. "He was a good man. He was." But the doubt was now planted, a seed of horror in her heart. I had done what the anonymous sender wanted. I had transferred the burden. "You could speak to the FBI," I suggested gently. "If he was innocent, they could clear his name for you." It was the only helpful thing I could offer. She left 20 minutes later, a broken woman. I felt sick. I had become an instrument of someone else's vengeance, a delivery system for poison. Who was doing this? And why use me as the messenger? The answer came the next day, in another envelope. This one contained a typed letter. "Mrs. Hollis, you have done well. You have a gift for uncovering truth and forcing people to face it. Gary Miller drove the getaway car the day my sister was taken. The police have no evidence. Now his family knows what he was. Thank you." Another sister. The letter wasn't for me. It was a receipt. I was being used as a tool in a stranger's private war. The scale of it was still domestic, still about family wounds, but the method was psychological warfare, and I was on the front line without my consent. It was no longer about uncovering the past, but about being manipulated in the present. I was tired of other people's battles. I wanted my quiet back. I put the letter in the folder. I needed to break this cycle. I needed to find out who another sister was, not for justice, but for my own peace. I picked up the phone. I had one person left to call. I called Lawrence Powell. I told him everything: the envelopes, the photo, Linda Miller's visit, the final letter. "Someone is using me to torment the families of these men," I said, my voice tired. "I want it to stop." He was quiet for a long moment. "It's likely a family member of one of the other victims. They have access to the investigation details, probably through a leak or a sympathetic cop. They're using you because you're a public figure in this now, and because you're effective." He sighed. "It's unethical. It could jeopardize the prosecutions if it's seen as witness tampering or harassment. I'll notify the FBI lead. They can put a word in with the families, warn them about interfering." "Will that stop it?" I asked. "It might. Or they might just get more careful." His tone was honest. "Margaret, you may need to change your P.O. box, screen your mail. This person sees you as an ally. You need to make it clear you're not." That meant disengaging completely, I had to become a closed door. After I hung up, I felt a profound sadness. My quest for Sarah had turned me into a beacon for other people's pain, a confessional for their rage. I had wanted to lay my daughter to rest, not become a permanent monument to grief. I went to the cemetery. I sat on the bench near Sarah's stone. The grass was starting to grow over the bare earth. "I'm so tired, sweetheart," I whispered. "I just want to remember you, not all the others." A breeze rustled the oak leaves. It felt like an answer. I decided to take Powell's advice. I would become boring, unreachable. I stopped going to the library. I let David handle my mail for a while, telling him I was getting too many sales flyers. He was happy to help. A week passed with no envelopes. Then 2. The young couple next door painted Carl's house a cheerful yellow. They planted marigolds. Life was moving on, stubbornly. David came over with my grandkids. We baked cookies. The kitchen was loud and sticky with dough. My granddaughter, Lily, age 7, looked up at me with flour on her nose. "Grandma, can I have your locket when I'm bigger?" I touched the silver heart under my blouse. Sarah's locket. I had thought I would be buried with it, but I looked at Lily's bright, alive face. "Yes, honey," I said. "When you're much bigger, I'll give it to you." It was a decision, a passing of the torch from one generation to the next, not of grief, but of remembrance. That night, after they left, I felt a shift. The weight of being the keeper of secrets, the avenger, began to lift. I was just a grandmother again. It was enough. I took the folder marked "closed" and put it in a filing cabinet in the basement, next to Bill's old tax records. I was putting it away, not forgetting, but storing it where it belonged, in the past. The seasons turned. Fall came, bringing crisp air and the smell of wood smoke. The anonymous letters never returned. The FBI's case made the news once. Roy Peterson was charged with obstruction of justice. No mention of Gary Miller. The network was being dismantled quietly, through pleas and deals. I didn't follow it closely. David and I had lunch every Tuesday. We talked about his job, the kids, my garden. He never mentioned assisted living again. He saw I was living, not just surviving. One Tuesday in October, he brought a box. "Cleaning out the attic," he said. "Found some of Sarah's things. I thought you might want them." It was a small box of her school projects, things I'd given him years ago for safekeeping. My breath caught, but it was a sweet ache, not a sharp one. I opened it. There were construction paper cards, a clay ashtray she made for Bill, a report on butterflies. At the bottom was a small, cloth-bound diary with a little brass lock. The key was gone. I'd forgotten about it. She'd gotten it for her 7th birthday, 2 months before she died. I held it gently. "Thank you, David." He hugged me. "I love you, Mum." After he left, I sat at the table with the diary. I found a small screwdriver and carefully pried the lock open. The pages were filled with her large, looping handwriting, descriptions of our cat, a fight with David, how much she loved the apple tree in the backyard, the mundane, beautiful details of a 7-year-old's life. On the last written page, she had written, "Today, I saw a red bird. Mum says it's a cardinal. It's my favourite. I am happy." I wept then, quiet, healing tears. This was the truth I had been fighting for. Not the horror of her end, but the simple beauty of her life. This was what the monster had tried to steal, and what I had taken back. I closed the diary. I placed it on the bookshelf, next to the family photo albums. It belonged there, with the living memories. The next day, I went to the craft store. I bought a small, beautiful shadow box. I placed Sarah's butterfly barrette, the one from Carl's box, inside. I added the photo of the cardinal she'd drawn in her diary, which I'd carefully copied. I wrote on a small card, Sarah, loved, remembered. I hung it on the wall in my living room, where the light from the window caught it. It was not a hidden trophy of revenge, but a public declaration of love. The doorbell rang. It was the young woman from next door, holding a pie. Hi, I'm Chloe. We just wanted to say hello properly. This is from us. She smiled, her pregnant belly round under her sweater. I invited her in. We had tea. She asked about the shadow box. My daughter, I said. She loved butterflies. It's beautiful, she said. We talked about gardens. She asked if I'd mind if they planted a climbing rose on the fence between our properties. It would be lovely, I said. After she left, I looked out at the backyard. The compost pile was gone, replaced by a new sandbox for the coming baby. The earth had been turned, new life planted. I could do the same. The fight was over. The quiet, personal resolution was not an ending, but a choice. To live in the present, to tend my own garden, and to let the past rest where it lay. I picked up the phone and called my granddaughter. Lily, I said, how would you like to help Grandma plant some bulbs for the spring? Planting bulbs with Lily was a lesson in patience and hope. Her small hands pushed the ugly brown lumps into the cold earth, and I told her they would be daffodils and tulips in the spring. But how do they know to come up, Grandma? She asked. They just know, I said. They remember their job is to grow. It felt like I was talking about myself. After she left, the quiet of the house was comfortable. The shadow box on the wall caught the afternoon light. I realized I hadn't thought about Carl, or Greg, or storage units for several days. The absence of that constant mental buzz was a gift. A few days later, Lawrence Powell called. His voice was warm, not urgent. I'm calling as a friend, Margaret, not a lawyer. The FBI's prosecutions are proceeding. Roy Peterson took a plea deal. He named 2 other men, both deceased. The file on the network is being closed. They believe the active threat is gone. He paused. They also traced your anonymous letters. It was the sister of a victim from 1998. She's been formally cautioned. She won't be contacting you again. Thank you for telling me, I said. It was the final loose thread, neatly snipped. You did an extraordinary thing, Powell said. You gave a lot of people closure. I was just looking for my daughter, I replied softly. I know. We said our goodbyes, and I knew I probably wouldn't speak to him again. That chapter was truly closed. Winter arrived with a gentle snow. I watched it blanket the yard from my kitchen window, a cup of tea in my hands. The young couple, Chloe and Ben, had their baby, a little girl. They brought her over, all wrapped in a pink blanket, to introduce her. I held her for a moment, her tiny weight a promise. They asked if they could name her Sarah, after my daughter. I was so touched I could only nod, tears in my eyes. It was a kindness I never expected, a bridge between the past and the future living right next door. David helped me put up my Christmas decorations. We found the old box with Sarah's handmade ornaments, popsicle stick reindeer, a clay angel. We hung them on the tree alongside the shiny new ones. It didn't hurt as much this time. It felt like she was part of the celebration, not a ghost at the feast. On Christmas morning, with my family crowded into the living room, wrapping paper everywhere, I felt a deep, settled contentment. I looked at David laughing with his son, at Lily showing me a new toy, at the shadow box on the wall. The fight had been worth it. It had cleared the ground, making this peace possible. But peace, I was learning, isn't a destination. It's something you build every day, like planting bulbs, trusting they'll remember to grow. The new year arrived quietly. I made no resolutions, only a quiet decision to be present. I started a small project, transcribing Sarah's diary into a clean notebook just for myself. It was slow work, my fingers sometimes stiff, but it felt like a conversation with her. I added my own notes in the margins. David had the chicken pox that week. Or, that was the cat, Mr. Whiskers. One afternoon in January, there was a knock at the door. It was Linda Miller, the daughter of Gary Miller. She looked less haunted than before, but still carried a somber air. She held a bakery box. "I was in the area," she said. "I wanted to thank you for being honest with me." I invited her in. We sat at the kitchen table. She told me she had gone to the FBI, as I'd suggested. They had interviewed her extensively about her father. "They showed me evidence," she said, her voice flat. Photographs he'd taken. Not of children, but of truck stops, of license plates. They were in a code he shared with Carl Anderson. He wasn't innocent. He was a lookout. He provided alibis. She stared at her hands. It's hard to hold two men in your heart. The dad who taught me to ride a bike, and the man who did that. I didn't offer platitudes. I simply listened. There was nothing I could say to make it better. Sometimes, witnessing the pain is all you can do. "Knowing has been awful," she continued, "but not knowing was worse. It was like a poison. So thank you." She left the bakery box, a lemon cake, and departed. I never saw her again. Her visit was a reminder that the ripples from what I'd done were still spreading, touching lives in ways I'd never see. It was a sobering responsibility. I ate a small piece of the cake. It was tart and sweet. Later that week, I received a formal letter from the county clerk. Gregory Anderson's probation had been revoked. He had violated the terms by contacting one of the other victims' families. He was sentenced to 18 months in prison. I felt no joy, only a cold satisfaction. The law had worked. I put the letter in the filing cabinet in the basement with the rest of it. Then I went outside to fill the bird feeder. The cardinal Sarah had written about, or his descendant, was a regular visitor now. I watched him, a splash of brilliant red against the white snow, and I felt a simple, uncomplicated happiness. The past was in the basement. The present was at my bird feeder. It was where I chose to live. Spring announced itself with the daffodils Lily and I had planted. They came up, a cheerful yellow line along the fence, just as promised. I showed them to her over a video call, her face beaming. "They remembered, Grandma." Chloe, from next door, started bringing little Sarah over in her stroller during her walks. We'd sit on the porch when the weather was nice. She was a happy baby, with curious eyes. I didn't see Carl in that house anymore. I saw a young family. The land had been healed. David helped me with my taxes. As we sorted receipts, he said, "You seem good, Mum. Really good." "I am," I said, and meant it. I had begun volunteering one morning a week at the local library, helping sort books for the annual sale. It got me out of the house, around people, talking about normal things. No one there knew my story, and I didn't tell them. I was just Margaret, the volunteer. One day at the library, I saw a familiar book on the donation cart. A true crime paperback about interstate kidnappings. The cover was lurid. I felt a cold tremor, but it passed quickly. I picked it up and placed it in the non-fiction bin. It was just a book. It had no power over me. That was the moment I knew I was truly free. The memories were still there. The sadness would always be a part of me. But the fear was gone. The monster was a story in a book to be filed away. not a ghost in my garden. I started writing letters again, real letters, to old friends I'd lost touch with. I wrote about my grandchildren, my garden, the new family next door. I did not write about the shed, or the locket, or the quarry. Those things belonged to a different story, one that was finished. My days developed a gentle rhythm. Coffee in the morning, watching the birds, a walk if the weather was fair, an afternoon with a book or a puzzle, dinner, often with David's family joining me. It was an ordinary life. After years of living with an extraordinary horror, ordinary was a miracle. I took the locket off one evening. I didn't put it away. I placed it in a small velvet pouch and put it in my jewelry box. I would give it to Lily one day, as I'd promised, but I didn't need to wear it against my skin anymore. Sarah was in my heart, not around my neck. The weight I let go of was my own. Summer came, and with it, heat. The climbing rose Chloe and Ben had planted on the fence burst into bloom, a cascade of pink. The scent drifted to my porch. I sat there often in the evenings, listening to the sounds of their baby giggling from their yard. David and Susan planned a family vacation to the lake and insisted I come. I was hesitant, a whole week away, but I went. I watched my grandchildren swim, their shouts echoing over the water. I dipped my toes in the cool lake. One night, around a campfire, my grandson asked, "Grandma, tell us a story from when you were little." So I told them about the time I got my bicycle tire stuck in a streetcar track. A silly, funny story. They laughed. It felt good to be the source of laughter, not of tears or grim determination. When we returned home, there was a message on my machine from the detective who had headed the local part of the investigation. She said the case file was being officially archived, and she wanted to personally thank me for my courage. I deleted the message. I didn't need the reminder. I found myself thinking more about Bill, my husband. The sharp grief of his passing had been dulled, overshadowed by Sarah's tragedy. Now I could remember him with fondness, with joy. I got out our wedding album. I told his stories to Lily, who never got to meet him. My life was becoming a collection of small, good things. The taste of a homegrown tomato, the sound of rain on the roof, the feel of a child's hand in mine. These were the bricks I was using to rebuild my world. I received a notice from the bank. The small savings account I'd used to pay for the storage unit rent had grown a little with interest. I decided to use it to buy a sturdy, beautiful bench for the cemetery. I had it placed under the oak tree by Sarah's grave, a place to sit and visit. I went there one afternoon and sat on it. It was peaceful. I told her about the daffodils, about baby Sarah next door, about the lake trip. It felt like a conversation. As I was leaving, I saw an elderly man tending a plot a few rows over. He nodded to me. I nodded back. We were two old people, visiting loved ones, part of the quiet rhythm of life and loss and memory. There was no drama left, and that was perfectly fine. The leaves turned again, a fire of orange and red. It had been a full year since I'd found the locket. I marked the day not with sorrow, but with a quiet ritual. I baked an apple pie, Sarah's favourite. David and his family came over. We ate pie and talked about nothing important. After they left, I sat on my porch bench, the one I'd bought for myself with a portion of the storage unit money. The air was cool, carrying the smell of fallen leaves and chimney smoke. I could see the yellow house next door, dark now, the young family asleep. My own house was warm and solid behind me. I thought about the journey, from a grieving mother to a hunter, to a witness, to a symbol, and finally back to a grandmother. The revenge I had wanted had transformed. It wasn't about punishment anymore. It was about restoration. I had restored Sarah's memory from a cold case file to a living presence in our family. I had restored my own authority over my life. I had even, in a small way, helped restore a measure of justice. The quiet, personal resolution wasn't a single event. It was this moment, and 100 like it. It was the ability to sit in the quiet and feel content. It was the lack of a looming shadow. It was the sound of my own breath, steady and calm. I went inside and locked the door. A habit, not a fear. I checked the thermostat. Another habit. I walked past the shadow box, touched it lightly with my fingertips. "Good night, sweetheart," I whispered. In my bedroom, I got ready for bed. My body was old. It creaked and ached, but it had carried me through. I slipped under the covers. The streetlight cast a soft glow through the window. I thought about tomorrow. I needed to buy more birdseed. Lily had a school play. I would call an old friend for lunch. As I drifted to sleep, I realized the story was no longer a thriller. It was just a life. My life. Long, with stretches of terrible pain, but also with love, with resilience, and with a quiet, stubborn hope that had finally bloomed. The end was not an ending, but a gentle continuation. And that was all I had ever really wanted.